So my name is Zawati. I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at McGill University. And I'm also an associate member of the Department of Experimental Medicine, but also the Faculty of Law. So you can already sense here the interdisciplinarity. I was trained in law. I did my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in law, but decided to do research on the ethical, policy, and legal issues in the field of genomics. So I have been working at McGill University for many years as a researcher and then as a PI on a multitude of projects that required research on ethical issues or policy issues. It could be, simply questions around the models of consent and issues surrounding governance, which we still are in need of course, and questions around access to fundamental research questions that require either an international comparative analysis or specific social science methodologies and legal methodologies that we would be able to share its output more fully.
Great. So what is something new or surprising that you've learned lately in your current research?
Surprising, maybe not, but new. I think, the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic, has allowed us to straighten this interdisciplinary sort of model that we've been working on. As part of my work, I'm involved in different fields within the general realm of genomics, whether it is regenerative medicine, whether it's biobanking or the creation of databases, there's stem cell research, whether it is COVID related studies, artificial intelligence, and so on. So I think for me, the new part is being able to be even more closer to the science and be more closer to the colleagues that are working in different disciplines and learning from them and getting a bit more information on some of the things that we may have read about but don't necessarily see in action. And that's the beauty of it, right? Because our work is work that's complementary to all of these, and it's seldom today that you'll find research projects that don't have multiple components. If we're working with human participants, ethics becomes central and important, but if we want to think about this for the future, we have to be prospective, we have to be anticipatory, and this requires that we think about these issues. But we can't come as sort of jurists or ethicists and work in the abstract. We really need to have this iterative process and be able to learn and provide input and vice versa. And so I think for me, although it was, of course, difficult times for everyone, it provided an opportunity to be closer to the work of other colleagues and learn from it. So yeah, that's, I would say, the new parts and that I've learned in my work.
That's great. That's very interesting and very exciting. Do you want to share maybe one example of a specific project where you've seen that kind of come to reality and there's a lot of learnings that can be applied to other projects now, maybe in your role with HostSeek?
Yes, I mean, HostSeek is a great example. Being able to create this national database. We tend to sometimes look at databases as a fait accompli, right? So this is it. We have the samples and we have the data, and now let's think about more the policy angles but policy angles needed to be thought of at the beginning of the process and have really opened the door for recruitment and when it came to access and the role that it played. So it was great to be able to understand links between, the field of genomics and the pandemic, and the role that it plays, and the role of the host, the role of the viral, sort of side of it, and how they interact, and the importance of linking it, and sort of the scientific the scientific rationale behind all of that. So there are things that we may have read about, in this field, that once we get to see how it is done in practice and its importance, and also the challenges there is on the ground, right? So I guess this provided an opportunity to see things more closely. And this is an example. I mean, there are other examples, not necessarily in the field of COVID, but in cancer research, or in stem cell work, or in regenerative therapy, especially with the more recent advances in the field. The great thing about it as well is that the kind of work that we do might not be limited to adults, but could also include minors and other participants. And this provides its own challenges and its own interesting questions. So again, you get to be able to work with experts, not only in a particular field, but in a particular population as well. And you can really see the differences and the things that that are probably more pertinent here and less relevant there.
Yeah, it definitely touches all different groups and people's lives. So in terms of what some major considerations are, you can use maybe Hostik as an example. You have the participant groups and you have the researchers. What do you think from an ethical and legal and policy standpoint, do you think people should understand about genomics, about access to this very precious data? Maybe you can give us a little bit more insight into what that looked like for you, your involvement leading the DACO, the Data Access Committee, and what were some of the major implications and considerations for this work?
Sure. I would say you have to see this as a kind of as the big picture, which is basically you have a participant. And in our case, it's usually in this case, and during the pandemic, there were patients, right? So, but you have the participant that is telling you, okay, I'm providing my sample, my data, and please go ahead and use it for research purposes. And there is, of course, this altruistic approach to it, but at the same time, it is really a reciprocal relationship that we are creating. Because the participant here is providing you with something and also expects something in return, not necessarily in the form of compensation or in the form of direct benefits, because most of the times they are told, in the consent process, there will be no direct benefits to you. This is for future generations, or for us to better understand, this or that disease and so on. But they do expect something else. They expect that you maximize on the use of this data and samples for the benefit of research. And they do expect that you, sort of protect, the confidentiality. They do expect to hear about general results. If the process or the project allows it, return of individual results is also a possibility. Not always possible for every project, but in some projects that are designed to allow that, especially if there's technology that is involved in terms of communication, this is also an expectation. These are just a few examples of this reciprocal, sort of relationship. And the idea here is, then the idea of data sharing, the idea of sharing, doesn't just become a question of statistical power or as a scientific imperative. It becomes an ethical imperative, because this is the way you will satisfy the promise that was made to participants initially when they provided you with the data. And so what this requires is creating a system that is ethical, that is efficient, right? And that allows the timely sharing of the data. So this is where the governance aspect comes in. And the efficient, ethical and equitable sort of sharing requires that you think of who's going to be involved, how this is going to be done, and how can we, sort of optimize the process to allow researchers then to be able to maximize on this and provide interesting and important and impactful output for the population. The challenges become the challenge becomes, well, how many groups are involved, and is this a local project? This is a national project? And of course, the bigger the project, the more challenges, because it involves multiple institutions that also need to be involved in the process and ensuring that everything is done. But if you want this to be quick, if you want this to be timely, it requires that we think of a one-stop shop, which is, well, as a researcher, I don't want to be knocking on multiple doors to access this rich data. I need to be able to do this in a way that is efficient, right? So this requires that we think of a centralized process for that, even if the data is federally, in a multitude of institutions. And this is the idea of creating what we call an access office, right? So this is an office that receives requests for access. It's an office that is not directly, it's sort of kind of an independent group. And it receives those requests, reviews them to ensure that all the documentation is presented, that all the answers to the questions in the application are responded to. And this is generally a very quick kind of review. We're talking about 24 to 48 hours. And then the idea is then to send it to a group of experts that will be able to review these applications and make a final decision. And the importance of having an independent committee cannot be, just brushed aside. It's extremely, important to be cognizant of the implication of having an independent group of experts able to do that. This removes any possible perception of, let's say, conflict of interest or or favoritism, and so this allows the process to be really fully independent, and it makes the researcher, whether they are part of the research group requiring access to the data that they've worked on collecting it, or if someone from outside, that they know that there is a fair process in place. And this has been, done in national, but also in international projects, and has shown, capacity to draw researchers in. But that being said, you also need to ensure that it doesn't take a long time before something like that, this process is finalized. So you have to put in place, procedures to ensure that this is done in a timely fashion. So you have to choose experts that are knowledgeable, that are not going to be second guessing and doing peer review of either ethics or peer reviewing of the science. This is not a grant application. This is an access request. So, individuals and researchers who are submitting will usually come with their own research ethics board approval, but that's already done and doesn't need to be done again. And most of them are funded, and have received scientific review. If that's the case, then it's not a scientific review or peer review. It's more about the feasibility of the submission, and it usually is a very quick. We've at HostSeek, DACO received close to 16 applications, and our timeline for review is usually between 15 and 17 business days, making it as timely as possible. So the idea of making it an efficient process, of course, allows us to more quickly sort of maximize on the statistical power and translate this knowledge to the clinic and translate it into better health for the population. And of course, the participant who initially was part of the project, seeing this sort of trickling down it will just increase their trust in the system. So it's a virtuous cycle that is created. And of course, this requires that you continuously engage with the public, you engage with specific populations, that you engage with the communities so that they better understand the process, are kept aware of novelty. This idea of having a newsletter is interesting. It's something that's public. The idea of having a website, having an online registry of applications that have been accepted, all of these are examples of tools to continue that form of engagement. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. This, you have to look at the big picture to be able to understand its importance.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any other considerations do you want to share with researchers that may be interested in accessing the HOSEEK databank or any other databanks in general that you're working on? Anything from a research standpoint that you think people should be aware of when they're looking to access this type of data?
Well, I mean, of course, it's about their research project, and I think HOSEEK database provides a very rich resource for researchers who are interested in better understanding the pandemic and working on trying to limit the impact of any future ones. There is a lot to learn from the content, but there's also a lot to learn from the process that was put in place. And I think this is going to be important. We're working right now on a white paper to sort of, kind of present our own experience of the past 2 years on from the policy development side to be able to, allow researchers and those that will, be dealing with this in the future to better understand how we did things and what were the challenges and what are the points that we need to consider for the future.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that you'd like to share in terms of your work beyond HOSEEK? Anything that's particularly exciting for you right now in this field?
Well, I mean, anything in genomics is exciting. One thing that really kind of excites me, or the many things that excite me, is first and foremost is that I feel like genomics is being democratized more and more. It's almost on everyone's lips. Pandemic, has of course a lot of negative impacts, and I'm sure we've all felt either small or big elements of it. But one of the maybe good things of it is that it really has put genomics on everyone's lips, and it's becoming, more and more under the light, and people are more and more interested in it. And I think what excites me, being an immigrant that came to Canada almost 32 years ago, is I'm seeing a lot of diverse young scholars who are interested in this field. And for me, this is testament of the excitement that this field has and will continue to have over the years. And another thing that I think excites me about genomics is its international scope, but more and more in low middle income countries as well, not just in Canada or the United States or in Europe, but many low and middle income countries are creating their own resources and using genomics to really kind of see it as a fundamental part of the healthcare of their population, and have created programs for that. So that's great as well. And finally, I think the issue of interdisciplinarity is very exciting. As I was mentioning earlier, we seldom find a situation or a project or an initiative where there are no, just one discipline. You'll find many disciplines, and this is an opportunity for a dialogue to happen, because there's a lot for someone like me to learn, and I hope a lot to give, and thinking about these issues and these challenges and under multiple formats allows us to provide really innovative solutions and sort of pave together a road, a roadmap or a path forward. So these are all things I think that excite me. I'm sure there's other things, but they'll they might come to me to my mind later on.
That's great. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to add or any final thoughts?
Well, no, but thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, this is a very interesting and exciting field, and there's a lot to explore, and there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to discover, and for those who are thinking about getting themselves in the field of genomics or getting themselves in the field of ethical, legal, and policy, world in genomics, you're more than welcome to think about that, and there's a lot of exciting things ahead.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll definitely be hearing from you again soon. Lots of important work being conducted with you and your team. So thank you for sharing a little bit about that with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.